It's 5:30 in the morning on a cold day in November 2020. Melissa's daughter heard the sound of the door closing in a luxury villa. Her mom was heading out for a run. Just like every morning, to clear her mind and start her day off better. But something was different that morning. When Melissa left the house, she took a big secret with her, a mystery that later captivated the whole country. Where did Melissa disappear to? And what did the secret have to do with one of the biggest fraud cases in Australia's history? In 2020, Melissa Caddick had everything she had dreamed of since childhood and had worked hard for. She lived in a big villa and had a closet full of designer clothes, a garage full of expensive cars, and she spent her vacations in luxury places like Spain. Melissa grew up in a loving family in a small neighborhood near Sydney called Lagarno. She never lacked anything as a child or teenager, but she always dreamed of becoming rich one day. After school, she took a few management classes at college and then started working at a small bank in Sydney. But she only worked there for 6 months. Why? Because she had stolen $2,000 from the company. She had forged her boss's signature for a check. Fortunately, they didn't call the police. Because she was young, they said, well, this is just a youthful adventure. Mistakes like this can happen at that age. They only forced her to return what she took. Melissa's friends said they already knew about this habit of hers. One of them recounted that once they had seen some expensive salt shakers at her house. When they asked her where she got them, she said she swiped them from a restaurant. Anyway, in her 20s, Melissa found a new job. She became a financial advisor at a company affiliated with ING. Melissa advanced quickly in her job and earned a good reputation. In fact, in 2003, her photo was featured on the cover of a reputable financial magazine called Independent Financial Advisor. Things were also going really well in her personal life. In 2000, she married Tony Caddick, a law student she had met during her backpacking trip in Sydney. Their wedding was super lavish, and even back then, their friends wondered how the couple managed to afford such an extravagant event, since they were both big spenders, especially Melissa, whose whole lifestyle was like that. Melissa loved designer clothes, especially from Dior and Chanel. They drove expensive cars, and it seemed like money was raining down on them. All this was happening even though Melissa had just been fired from her prestigious job at Y Financial Services. But Melissa had a story for how she got rich. She told everyone she was a multimillionaire. But how? Well, to some people, she said she'd received an $86 million settlement from her previous job, and to others, she claimed she'd won a multi-million-dollar payout in a sexual harassment case. But all of that was a lie. In 2010, Tony, Melissa's husband, who had now become a lawyer, moved with her and their 4-year-old son to the UK. At that time, Melissa was a homemaker, but she wanted to get back to work, so she insisted that Tony take a finance training course in Brussels. But while Melissa was on that trip, Tony got a message from a friend who had, by pure chance, seen Melissa in Paris with another man. See how small the world is? But the truth is, Melissa had been cheating on Tony for a while, and it was with her hairdresser, Anthony Colty. Ever since they moved to Britain, she would regularly bring this guy over from Sydney to Europe, and interestingly, all the expenses were paid out of Tony's pocket. When Tony found out about Melissa's affair, he filed for divorce. He decided to spend a few days at a friend's house, but when he came back home, he saw that the house was completely empty. And not just the house, his bank account was empty too. Melissa went back to Sydney with her son and their she portrayed herself as the victim of a bad marriage. Interestingly, she told her friends that Tony was a controlling and narcissistic person. She even told another friend that he had cheated on her and had hit her several times. But these were the smallest of Melissa's lies. On New Year's Eve 2013, Melissa surprised her family and friends with a sudden wedding. She married Anthony Colletti, who was 11 years younger than her. This marriage wasn't well received among her friends at all. Many people made fun of them and said, with all of Melissa's love for money and luxury, why would she marry a younger hairdresser? They even gossiped about Anthony, saying he was just a toy for Melissa, like one of her expensive handbags, something to show off and flaunt her feminine energy. In short, Melissa's second wedding, just like her first, was extravagant and flashy. They spent a lot of money on the wedding night. Just imagine, the bride changed her dress 3 times. She even bought her wedding dresses from Gucci. Their main celebration was held at that same luxury venue, Espen. Apparently, all of this was thanks to the money Melissa had made from her financial management company. Melissa founded this company in 2012 when she returned to Sydney. She introduced herself as one of the best financial advisors in Australia and promised her clients that she would manage their savings and get them a 30% profit. She claimed that she herself had gotten rich using this very method. Her family and friends also saw her apparent success. They saw her expensive cars, designer clothes, and jewelry, and they believed what she said. In short, Melissa was drowning in luxury, and all of this made it so that no one suspected her. Gradually, things got to the point where a lot of people were around Melissa, asking her to manage their money. Most of them were friends, acquaintances, or even her own family. Over a period of 20 years, Melissa managed about $30 million for these people, and apparently she had invested this money very smartly. Every month, she would give her clients a report on their stock trading accounts. In those reports, there was always a profit, never a loss. These high returns made people trust her even more and give her even more money than before. Melissa and Anthony didn't know the meaning of saving money. It was like they were drowning in money. Melissa bought a modern, stylish house with a harbor view in the luxurious neighborhood of Sydney. They spent their vacations in luxury places like New York, the Fiji Islands, or Spain. One time, when there was no snow in Spain, Melissa quickly changed their plans and they went to a luxury resort in Canada, which cost them $34,000. But these expenses weren't even that significant compared to the rest, because most of Melissa's money was spent on clothes. For example, one day she spent $54,000 on a single pair of shoes, or another time, $250,000 on jewelry. Her closets were full of designer clothes from brands like Dior, Chanel, Valentino, and Louis Vuitton. Apparently, Melissa's life and work were going really well. Until November 11th, 2020, when the doorbell rang at her house. There were police officers and tax officials standing at the door, and of course, they had a search warrant. They accused Melissa of a major financial fraud, and it was at that moment that Melissa realized the secret of her life full of lies had been exposed. But her story had actually started back in 2019, when an anonymous report was sent to the Australian Securities and Investments Commission, known as ASIC. The report stated that Melissa was providing financial services without a license, but after further investigation, it turned out that for years Melissa had been misusing a former colleague's license and never had one herself. It was also revealed that Melissa's resume was full of lies. The educational qualifications and work experience she claimed simply didn't exist. But this was just the beginning. Melissa's entire company was a massive fraud. There were no shares, no investments had been made. Everything was one big lie. Melissa had set up a Ponzi scheme. In this type of scam, the person convinces gullible people to hand over their money with promises of high returns and low risk. But in reality, no investment is made. She just takes the new money and uses it to pay returns to earlier clients. Melissa had built herself a multimillionaire lifestyle with her clients' money. Luxury homes, expensive trips, a private jet, designer clothes, fancy cars, and even her son's private school tuition. Now all of this was right in front of her victims' eyes. Those who were impressed by Melissa's apparent success thought that one day, with her investment help, they could reach that kind of wealth too. They dreamed and dreamed, not knowing what would really happen to their money. But who were Melissa's real victims? Melissa deceived her own family, her parents, her brother, her uncles, aunt's cousins, her aunt's son, her aunt's husbands, and even her close friends and former colleagues. She didn't spare anyone. Many of them had even sold their own houses and apartments and given the money to Melissa, but Melissa just used that money to make herself rich and then left Turkey. Later, the police found a photo of her dog, and apparently, by coincidence, something was written on the back saying that Melissa was making $46,000 a day from her scams. But one of the things that shocked everyone was the amount of energy and the elaborate schemes Melissa put into these scams. She even deceived the closest people in her life, like her own parents and her in-laws. She forged their signatures to get their money. She even created fake financial reports for her clients and sent them out every month. With those reports from an anonymous person, the Australian Securities and Investments Commission, or ASIC, monitored Melissa's bank accounts for several months, and finally, on November 11th, 2020, they froze her accounts and entered her luxury home with a search warrant. Before we continue with the story, please support us by liking and subscribing. Thank you so much! A police officer said during the confiscation of the items, "Do you have any valuables here? Because we're going to confiscate most of these items." Well, to be honest with you, is everything here valuable? What do you mean by everything is valuable? Well, I mean these necklaces are worth about $80,000 to $100,000. There, the police confiscated everything of value: handbags, jewelry, expensive watches, designer clothes, even cash. During the search of her house, Melissa was often standing next to the police with her hands tied and didn't show any particular reaction. People who were there said that Melissa seemed very calm. It was as if she already knew that everything would eventually be exposed one day. Now Melissa knew that all her lies had been exposed, and her multi-million-dollar fraud could land her in prison for years. Maybe it was at this very moment that Melissa made a decision, or maybe she had made it long before. Whatever the case, that decision turned this fraud case into one of Australia's biggest mysteries. She gets arrested, but then is released on bail by the court. But on the morning of November 12th, 2020, at 5:30 in the morning, Melissa's son wakes up to the sound of the door. Every morning, Melissa would go for a run. That day, too, she apparently set out as usual. This happened just a few hours after all her schemes had been exposed. But this time, Melissa doesn't take her phone or her keys with her. None of the nearby security cameras capture any footage of her leaving either. Several hours pass, and Melissa doesn't come back. At first, Anthony, Melissa's husband, drives around the streets himself looking for his wife. But there's no sign of her. Still, he doesn't go to the police until about half an hour after Melissa goes missing. When the time for the first court session arrives and she doesn't show up, Anthony reports that Melissa is missing. On the day she disappeared, when the police go to Anthony's house to take the missing person report, they notice something strange. Anthony had claimed over the phone that he was very worried about Melissa and was shaking with fear. But when the police show up at his door, he greets them with a big smile and doesn't seem worried at all. Anthony said, "I'm shaking. I haven't slept in several nights, and I haven't eaten anything for 3 days. I'll do anything I can." The police ask him, "When was the last time you saw Melissa?" Anthony replied, "Around 12 o'clock on Wednesday night." Anthony said that Melissa disappeared at midnight on Wednesday, but when the police questioned him further, it became clear that there had been no news from Melissa since Thursday morning, meaning 24 hours earlier. Anthony said, "I don't know why she left. Whatever she did, it was legal. I just want to find her. Money doesn't matter to me. Nothing can replace the love of our life." The police suspected that Anthony was hiding something and asked him to tell them everything he knew, because only then could they find Melissa. Nevertheless, Anthony insisted that he had nothing to hide. The police immediately launched an extensive search, but there was no trace of Melissa. There was no activity on her cell phone, no bank transactions, and not even a single CCTV image showing Melissa leaving the house herself. It was as if Melissa had vanished into thin air. The case quickly made headlines and attracted the attention of the Australian media and even international outlets. Various theories about Melissa's fate were proposed. One of the most common theories was that, after her fraud was exposed, Melissa had committed suicide. Melissa's entire life was built on lies and pretending to be successful. Now that everything had been exposed, she was facing the risk of losing all her assets and going to prison for a long time. It was possible that, on that early morning, Melissa had jumped off the seaside cliffs during her usual run. But on the other hand, many people rejected this theory. Melissa wasn't the type of person who would consider suicide. Even after everything that had happened. One of the reasons was that Melissa loved her son and could never leave him alone. Parastan didn't think Melissa was the kind of person who would confess to her mistakes through suicide. People like that usually deny their lies until the very last moment and look for a way out. So now the question is, if Melissa didn't commit suicide, then what happened? Some people think that maybe Melissa got involved with dangerous people because of her scams, or that she was kidnapped or killed. But the police consider this unlikely since most of Melissa's victims were her own family and close friends, and after she disappeared, they begged her to come back in tears. But one of the strongest rumors is that Melissa disappeared voluntarily, and her husband Anthony probably helped her. There is a lot of evidence showing that Melissa had been planning her escape for a long time. For example, it was rumored that before her house was searched, she had gathered and destroyed some documents and records. And this explains why she was so calm during the police investigation. It's possible that Melissa had already transferred money to a secret account, bought a place to hide, and erased all the financial traces related to these actions. Considering that Melissa had scammed $30 million from 72 people, she had enough money for a big escape. Even with the extremely luxurious lifestyle she had, it's still unclear exactly where all that money went. Anthony, Melissa's husband, claimed that he had no idea his wife was a con artist, but many believe Anthony knew more about the situation than he admits. However, Melissa's father doesn't believe this. In an interview, he said, Anthony is a hairdresser. I don't think he had any idea about Melissa's financial schemes, and I don't think he was involved or even knew what his wife was up to. But the question that comes up here is, could Anthony have helped Melissa escape? A lot of people say it's strange that Anthony only contacted the police 30 hours after Melissa disappeared. And that was exactly when Melissa was supposed to appear at her first court hearing. At that moment, instead of explaining why Melissa didn't show up, Anthony reported that she'd been missing since the day before. It's possible that on the morning of November 12, 2020, things didn't happen the way Anthony described. Maybe Melissa never went out for a run at all and instead put her escape plan into action. This could explain why there was no footage of Melissa on any of the security cameras around their neighborhood. It's possible that Anthony helped Melissa hide and gave her a chance to get to a safe place ahead of time. And then, once he was sure his wife was safe, he reported to the police that Melissa hadn't come back. Anthony's behavior after Melissa disappeared was also suspicious. He didn't seem too worried, and it looked like he knew his wife wasn't in any danger. But the first clue came on February 21st, 2021, 3 months after Melissa disappeared, when the first lead about her fate was found. A grey running shoe was found on the southern coast of New South Wales, about 500 kilometers away from Melissa's home. It was the same model of shoe that Melissa was wearing in the police footage from the search of her house. Inside the shoe, a foot was found that had been severed from the leg and had decomposed. The police announced at a press conference that it was highly likely the severed foot belonged to Melissa. By studying ocean currents, it was confirmed that if the foot had entered the water from where Melissa lived, it could have reached that shore after 3 months. Later, a DNA test also confirmed that the foot belonged to Melissa. 2 months later, in April 2021, Paris dropped all charges against Melissa due to her presumed death. Melissa's assets, including jewelry, artwork, cars, and luxury clothing worth $860,000, were liquidated so that some of the money could be returned to the victims of her fraud. However, Anthony objected to this decision and requested that their house in Deauville, Melissa's Gucci wedding dress, $7 million in stocks, $2 million in jewelry, 2 other properties, and the money from the sale of the cars Melissa had gifted him be returned to him. But his request was denied, and he was forced to move out of that house. That house was sold in early 2023 for nearly $10 million. In February 2023, Melissa was officially declared dead. Authorities believe that on the morning of November 12, 2020, Melissa committed suicide by jumping off a high seaside cliff. But Anthony still insists that his wife was murdered, and he keeps saying that Melissa never deceived anyone. However, there's still a theory that's causing controversy. Is it possible that someone like Melissa, who was so cunning that she even deceived her family, friends, and parents, could be clever enough to fake her own death by cutting off her ankle? Forensic experts and criminologists have repeatedly emphasized that a severed foot does not necessarily mean a person is dead. It's possible that this was done to close her case so that the police and creditors would stop looking for her. But in this case, what personally caught my attention was the discovery of the foot. Apparently, Melissa Caddick's foot was found by someone who was walking along the beach. This beach is in southern New South Wales, about 500 kilometers from where Melissa lived. When this person saw a gray sneaker containing the remains of a foot, they informed the police, and no one suspected them. but it would have been pretty easy to bribe someone with a little money to say they found the shoe on the beach. Someone like Melissa, who came up with such schemes, in my opinion, is capable of anything. Now, many of the victims, including Melissa's family and friends, suffered from depression and psychological problems after this story was exposed. Losing trust in their loved ones was probably the biggest blow for them. Interestingly, research has shown that people like Melissa, who weave complex lies, often have charismatic personalities and high social appeal. These very traits make it hard for others to recognize abnormal or warning behaviors in time. Melissa was probably suffering from some kind of antisocial personality disorder or narcissism, which is the same as being self-absorbed. These disorders often cause people to exploit others without feeling any guilt and to make even big lies seem believable. Another point was that Melissa promised unusually high or risk-free returns. This is a major red flag because no legitimate investment can guarantee high returns without risk. People should always have direct oversight of their own assets as investors. This case is still one of the favorite topics for journalists and documentary makers, and from time to time, new information or fresh theories about it come up. Share your own opinions and theories about Melissa and her fate with me and the rest of the community. Thank you so much. Until the next video, take care.